Actually, my parents, I didn't really tell them. Well, I told them like one day before I was coming. That's kind of how I usually operate. They want me to come home. My mom texts me every day, come home, come home, come home. I'm trying to get them to come. 안녕하세요. 저는 미국에서 온 할리입니다. 반갑습니다. So my name is Hallie and I'm from the US and I've been in Korea for about 5 years. Yeah. Nice to meet you all. Right now, I work as a commercial model. I don't like to use that word because I'm not like a fashion model, but my visa is E6, which means that my work activities are limited to doing commercials. Typically, I work for companies like LG or Hyundai or some smaller companies. My role is like a mom. I think Koreans are not very good at guessing my age. So even though I'm 26, sometimes I have like a 13-year-old son in the commercials. It's fun. I love my job because every single time I get to go to a different place and meet different people, different teams. Yes. I think Korean life suits me. Compared to when I was living in the US, I do feel like I fit in more in Korea. Of course, I don't feel like a native or accepted as Korean, but I like to embrace the parts of me now that are Korean, my habits that I have that are kind of Korean. For example, when I was in the US, I kind of acted with more nunchi than most of my friends, which in the US it was a little bit strange. But then when I came to Korea, it's such a positive thing. So I think that that really helped me with my life here. When I was in the US, I was studying at a university and studying international affairs. I needed to choose a place to study abroad. I ended up choosing Korea. Majority of people were choosing China and Japan, so I just wanted to be different. Also, I studied Korean history at my university, so I got a lot of interest in that. I do think that Korean culture and Korean pop and skincare and food, it has been bringing people to Korea. Yeah, the major that I had was actually Asian international affairs. So we focused mainly on China, Korea, and Japan and their interactions and also their interactions with the US. I thought that it was interesting how recently Korean modern history has begun, because the part that I studied and was really interested in was after 1950. So after the end of the Korean War in 1953. So I studied a lot of the politicians that the US kind of helped into power. So that was what was really interesting to me. I think Hangul is a very efficient system. So I kind of fell in love with Hangul itself, not Korean language, but the writing system. I first came to Korea in 2015 for just a week, just visiting. And then when I went back to the US, I immediately started making plans to come back to Korea in 2016 for study abroad. And I studied abroad for 1 month. And then after that, I think I went back to the US for 1 week and then decided like I'm moving to Korea. Korea is definitely the most, I would say, different place that I've been to compared to the US. Actually, I think the longer you live here, the more cultural differences you find. It might not feel so different when you first arrive here, but being here 5 years, I do think that each year I find more and more differences. For me personally, actually, the cultural difference is not very hard to overcome. It's easy to accept, oh, she's Korean, I'm American, and we have a different point of view. The things that are actually more difficult about living here would be the very small things like online banking, renting a car. Oh, for me, one of the shocking things was how Koreans kind of keep to themselves in general compared to Americans. Like, it can be good and bad, because in the US we can be like too involved in each other's lives and it can be really annoying and it can be like an invasion of privacy. But then also there have been times in Korea where, for example, like I fall down in the subway and then people just kind of look at me and keep walking, you know, they don't ask, are you okay? Which can be good from their perspective because they don't want to embarrass me. So I understand that, and I think more that way now since I've lived in Korea for so long. But definitely when I first came here, I was like, oh, that's so rude. Like, they're not helping me, but now I understand why. So it's both the positive and negative. Well, when I mentioned that I have a lot of nunchi, that actually comes with the fact that I have a lot of anxiety. So when I was living in the US, I'm constantly reading the room and trying to figure out like, how is she thinking? How is he thinking? Like, what do they need? In the US, that was kind of like too much. But then now that I'm in Korea, it turned out to be a positive thing because I am always the first one to pour the water for them or like notice, oh, he doesn't have anything to drink, and then get up and get it for them, or she's sweating a little bit, like I should turn on the AC, things like that. Actually, my parents, I didn't really tell them. Well, I told them like one day before I was coming. That's kind of how I usually operate. My parents are great. They're very protective, and I have decided that instead of convincing them of things before they happen, I'll just do it and then convince them it's a good idea later. They're not supportive. They want me to come home. My mom texts me every day, come home, come home, come home. They haven't visited Korea or anything, so I'm working on it. I'm trying to get them to come. They think I'm just on some like long holiday, but I'm like, Mom, it's been 5 years. I live here, I have a cat here, I have a dog here, I have a house, I have like a job. Also, I have 2 brothers and 1 sister, and they're all teens to 20. So I think it's time for them to come and visit me. I'm working on them too. If my parents come visit me here, I really just want to show them my day-to-day life so that they can relate a little bit more. For example, now when we call, there's not much that we can talk about because they don't fully understand how things operate here. In my hometown, we don't have a subway and we don't have a bus system or anything like that. So for example, if they call me and I say, oh, I can't talk right now, I'm on the bus. It's very quiet in Korea, like compared to the US. They're like, so you're on the bus, you can still call us. But I just want to show them and explain like that's how it is. Yes, at this point, I definitely consider Korea my home. Like I said before, I don't consider myself Korean or anything like that, but definitely Korea is my home. I've been here for 5 years, and because I came here at such a young age, I came here when I was 20, all of my development, like my personality development, has been in Korea, not in the US. Like I said, right now I'm doing lifestyle modeling, but I don't see myself doing that in the future. When I first came to Korea, my dream was to become a diplomat, and I am still holding on to that. So right now the plan is to get as much work as possible, save up money, attend school to get my master's degree, and then hopefully do something in the diplomacy field. 오늘은 제가 어렸을 때 무조건 한국을 선택한 이유에 대해서 말해봤습니다. 영상이 재밌었다면 좋아요, 구독 눌러주세요. Thank you. Bye.